Great. Good afternoon. Welcome back to Senate Education 347 on February 23rd, Thursday. We are going to jump into driver's education. We heard that there's a problem out there that the driver's ed collaborative faculty from around the state has identified. They went down and had a conversation with Senate Transportation, and they suggested they come down and have a conversation with us. Barbara, it's always great to see you.
Always great to see you too, Senator. Sorry I couldn't be there in person.
No, well, Barbara and I know each other because Barbara is an incredible driver's ed teacher. And Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, were you the teacher that was incorporating sort of connecting driver's ed with physics and other classes?
Correct, and you're never wrong. Yes, at People's Academy, we did, and they were very good in the guidance department. They matched my driver's ed class at the exact same time the physics class meant. And we did a joint session on, why car crashes happens, because it's about Newton's law of motion. And the biology of a car crash, what happens to your body when you have a car crash with a seatbelt or with not. And then, so we did a lot of outside activities that we invited the sixth grade, back then the sixth grade was in elementary school, now it's part of the middle school, to help us with timing and stuff like that, to get them involved in science. And it was a great program. And that teacher, I left to move on, and the physics teacher left to move to Virginia, and he started doing it in his Virginia class. So yes, and you came with your committee, and you were one of the few people that got in my car. Most people don't want to watch a car lesson. Yeah, and you did. So
I loved it. I loved it. Yeah.
So I appreciate
Barbara,
that.
Do you want to start off? I mean, you're second on the list here, but do you want to start the conversation? You want me to have Joe start the conversation?
No, I will do it the way we did it in the Senate. I'll start, and then Joe.
Okay.
If that's okay with Joe.
Joe, all right. Okay, sounds good.
Okay, great. And we may have some others that are on here. Dr. Weirman's here from Castleton if you have questions. Yes. Okay, good afternoon. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. My name is Barbara Brody, and I am the Executive Director of the Vermont Driver and Traffic Safety Education Association. I am also a licensed driver education teacher through the Agency of Education and the Department of Motor Vehicles. I have been teaching in Vermont since 1979. During that time, I have taught at driver education in 3 different high schools and at the Essex Center for Technology. I now work part-time with Youth Spectrum in Burlington, teaching driver education to students in the foster care system. I have a master's degree in educational leadership, and I attended a doctorate program at the University of Minnesota. Having a driver education teacher with proper professional licensing is very important to our teams in this state and for the safety on our highways. For many years now, we have had potential driver education teachers take courses through Keene State College. They hired master degree teachers who had a background in driver and traffic safety. When AOE had a consultant at the department who had a driver and traffic safety background, they took the responsibility of conducting the teacher licensing program, first through the University of Vermont, which is where I got my endorsement, then Vermont College, and then Castleton State Continuing Education Program. When the department eliminated the consultant position, the Higher Ed Collaborative took over this responsibility. After that, we decided that Keene State College's traffic safety department would certify our Vermont teachers at New Hampshire's in-state tuition. This worked out perfectly. Our teachers would take the courses and get certification through AOE and our private driving schools through DMV. Recently, White Mountain Community College in New Hampshire has offered driver education courses for licensing. They undercut the cost of the courses tremendously, so much that Keene State, as of January, discontinued the department. White Mountain Community College does not have any instructors with a traffic safety background. They have each student buy a textbook and have them read a chapter and write a paper, read a chapter and write a paper. For the behind the wheel course, they would send articles about teaching behind the wheel instruction and have teachers write a paper about those articles. Recently, several teachers took courses from White Mountain Community College and became employed by Vermont school districts. They notified the Vermont Driver and Traffic Safety Association that they were nervous about teaching the behind the wheel segment of driver's education since they themselves were never taught in a vehicle. We got into action and matched those teachers with veteran teachers to retrain them in teaching the behind the wheel phase of driver education. This practice cannot continue. Once I was notified of this situation, I contacted the chancellor of the Vermont State Colleges. She connected me with Patricia Moulton, the executive director of the Vermont State Colleges Workforce Division. Patricia and the leaders of the Driver Education Association had a Zoom meeting, and we explained the situation and discussed what we could do. I recommended that we connect with Castleton Center for Schools, where we once had the teacher licensing courses housed. I thought two things. First, let's keep the tuition money in the state. And second, because there's a driver ed teacher shortage, we should connect with juniors and seniors at the state universities who are enrolled in a teacher prep program, getting an endorsement in a subject matter, and then take their electives in driver and traffic safety. So when they graduate, they would have an endorsement in their major subject and an endorsement in driver education. I know as a former school administrator in charge of hiring, if I saw a resume of an applicant who had multiple endorsements, they would get to the front of the pile for an interview. The liability issue of having recently certified teachers from White Mountain Community College who are teaching the in-vehicle segment of driver education without proper training is a collision waiting to happen. It is important that not only AOE and DMV recognize institutions in our state that will provide the certification courses, but they discontinue recognizing White Mountain Community College and not certified teachers who attended the program. If not, White Mountain Community College will undercut the cost of our university program, and we are back where we started. We will continue to work with Vermont State University Workforce and Community Economic Development Department and with Dr. Reardon, Director of Education at Castleton Center for Schools, to help solve this problem. We hope that the Senate Education Committee will help us see this through and help us resolve this situation. Thank you very much, Barbara Brody.
Thank you, Barbara. Just for clarification though, so if you were to summarize this problem, is this a funding problem or?
Well, it's not a funding problem. It's a funding problem in the sense that White Mountain Community College, you know, charges so little that Keene State could not keep up because, you know, if I'm a teacher or wanting to be a driving school teacher and certified to get my own private school, and I can get certified, I'm going to pay less per credit from Green Mountain than I would from another institution. And that's what happened. And they had a ton of New Hampshire people and Vermont people go through that system who chose not to go to Keene State.
Yeah. Okay. It's clear to everybody.
And we have national standards that Joe will talk about. You know, we have to make sure that all our teachers match those national standards. And the one that went through Keene State or went through Castleton State originally or University of Vermont, we all did. And Joe will talk about those standards.
So maybe this would help. So what would you like us to do? That could help them. Yeah, legislatively.
Well, I think legislatively, you know, if we could, I know that AOE and DMV understand the problem. But we need to have, you know, we obviously need an alternative place. And right now we don't have that alternative place. So whatever the legislature can do to help the Vermont university system make that happen would be great.
Okay, Senator Thune.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it also sounds like we need to codify that White Mountain is not recognized as a certification location?
Right, for Vermont. Yes, I
Right.
mean, we can't say anything to New Hampshire, but as New Hampshire has connected with me, they said we have no place else to go. So we want to have an opportunity to be able to have New Hampshire students as they used to. We used to have classes together at Keene State, New Hampshire and Vermont students. And we actually got New York people because they're now it's stuck. So there is potential to have a lot of teachers or wanting to be driving school teachers involved if we could get the university system up and running.
Okay, Joe, do you want to join us?
Yes, I can. I just want to make sure Bart's had her chance.
Yeah, and Barb's, she's gonna stay. Okay. So again, welcome, Joe. Glad you're here. You're the president of the Vermont Trucker Safety Education Association.
Actually, I hold a higher office. I am president of the American Driver.
Of the American.
Yeah, so
Thank you. That's great. But we're glad you're here.
and I'm
He's
going
our national president. We're very excited when he got elected.
So Joe, if you could also frame up the problem that we're trying to solve and talk about possible solutions, that would be great.
Sure. What I will do is just identify from the website for White Mountain Community College on their accreditation page, and I can give you highlighted copies if you want them. But they give their accreditation through the New England NECHE, which is a New England association that has given the school accreditation. But further down, next paragraph, accreditation by the NECHE applies to the institution as a whole. It does not guarantee the quality of every course or program offered, nor does it guarantee the competence of every graduate. Rather, it provides reasonable assurance of the quality of opportunities available to students who attend the institution. So that's off of their site. And if you want copies, I'm sure that I'll share them, or I'll take them so you don't have to deal with undue paperwork.
Okay.
So just to reiterate that, and there are some national standards. The current version, which is going to be outdated in the next 6 to 8 weeks, is what we call the Novice Teen Driver Education Administrative Standards. This is what we all look at, and Vermont was just recently assessed as to how they stand to these standards currently. That came out in December. Unfortunately, at that time, Keene was still offering classes. When this report came out, the Keene had ended that, so that might have changed what that report was. I have my copy of that report, but there's a couple key points in that I'm going to refer to. Bear with me.
So while you're looking at that, Joe, for pulling us together, so what you're trying to do is in the state of Vermont, start up a new program.
Start up a program that
Okay.
meets the requirements in the
Okay.
Agency of Education that match
Okay.
the national standards that we've worked on.
Okay.
And to be honest, we go back early 2000s. Vermont was actually asked, we had our state consultant come down to an NTSB symposium where they testified as to how Vermont did their teacher training.
Yeah.
There had been a particularly horrendous crash in Montana. They were doing an investigation and they didn't know what the standard of driver education was across the country.
Yeah.
Sadly, the nation didn't look very good, but Vermont came in with a model program that we had started with, that I had gone through, and I've also co-taught some of the classes there. To give you an idea of what we're talking about is,
And just before you do that, Joe, can you just tell me, we're talking about starting a program where we would be training teachers who would then teach our students.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
so, and just using the national standards.
Yeah.
The organization that I work for, ATSIA, can work through the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration
Okay.
to provide some credentialing and certification for trainers.
Okay.
That's available if it's needed. I've co-taught some of the classes. So the rhetorical question I'm going to throw out there is this. I'm going to presume you've all been driving for a while, but if you had your young adults or someone that has never been in a car before,
Mhm.
you're taking a sharp turn to the left or the right. At what point and how do you straighten out so that you arrive in the lane in the proper lane position. I just ask it rhetorically, it's not a quiz.
Okay.
And if that's one concept is toying with your mind, is that we could physically talk about it in the classroom. I have to, with my high school students, go out and actually go to the exact point with my break, stop, show that it lines up at that point, and have them take the correct actions.
Learning by doing.
Learning by doing. And it's the same thing I had to do when I was teaching the same coursework for teachers who are trained to become driver ed teachers. It's a really one of the most difficult concepts that are out there for them to relate to. So again, the hands-on is really important. In the assessment, they talked about more of the hands-on lab and getting teachers into practicing in the car and in the classroom as part of the training model. So there are some of the guidelines that came out from that assessment, which I could go through, but they're more that hands-on, giving people more practical experience. We've done a lot of peer teaching. That's worked really well, but a lot of it since COVID's also happened to be remote. Go film yourself doing some of these activities. I'm sure Rod Hall, who's also taught the classes at Keene State, could probably add a little bit more of that on what he does. One of the key things I think that would be helpful is out of the assessment, one of the key priority recommendations was to create an advisory board for both public and driver education, private driver training school programs, which includes program stakeholders, so that we're not necessarily coming here, but this just came out in December. If we could sit together with the stakeholders and maybe work through it, begin to develop a good relationship. It's what came about with ANSTI, which is the National Organization of Stakeholders, that came about that provided this document after the Montana crash and the NTSB investigation. So in what I'm thinking about is if we can get together and in a collaborative fashion to build really a state-of-the-art teacher training program and begin to incorporate that, as Barb said, into the students who are juniors and seniors to help them get a second endorsement, which will make them a little bit more viable candidates.
Okay, so if you're leaving, you're going to still teach history, but you're also certified to teach driver's ed, something.
Correct. And that makes it more viable.
And Senator, there's probably no driver ed teacher in public school that doesn't have an endorsement, a dual endorsement in something. Most of them are phys ed, driver's ed, health ed, driver's ed, because they take a lot of similar courses, drug and alcohol, first aid, things like that. But we actually have a lot of science teachers, driver's ed. We have some math teachers. So that is not unusual for our teachers to have more than one endorsement.
Senator Bueller has a question.
Yeah, I was hoping that Mr. March could take us through how in the olden days, how did people get in Vermont? How did these folks, like my friend Bill Mayville, how did he get endorsed to be a driver's ed teacher?
Well, I know Bill well. He and I taught together. He and I were in the same courses at the University of Vermont.
Okay,
and they had all the courses there. They did it in the summer, so it took a few summers to get it done. And because I had a physical education endorsement, I already had drug and alcohol. I already had first aid. I already had philosophy of education. I had some of the core, so I just needed the classroom phase, the behind the wheel phase, and one other subject, and so did Bill. And we both got our certification. And he went on, and of course he was teaching in Essex, and I went on and taught at Mount Abraham.
and when did they get rid of that program? Do you know?
Well, at the University of Vermont?
Yeah.
Well, that was a while ago, and because things change. And then we moved on to, well, we had a Vermont College, which was up the hill from the State House, but that doesn't exist anymore. And then we went to Castleton, and then I'm not sure why we stopped in Castleton, but then we went to Keene State. And we had been working with VTC to try to bring it back because the Career Center directors would like to have Career Center teachers being certified. And they necessarily didn't have a bachelor's degree. They had a degree in whatever they were, auto mechanics or forestry or whatever they were doing. And a lot of the career centers wanted to simulate what Essex does, because in Essex, it's a one-stop school. You get in there in the morning, you take academics in the morning, your career during the day, and you take electives and driver's ed, phys ed, health ed, or all in the afternoon. So they never went to their Sunday school for another course. But then COVID happened and everything stopped, and we all had to learn how to teach online.
So my experience is a little bit differently, where we would bring in experts from outside of the states. Some of them were a former consultant from Department of Education to teach some of the classes. One of the classes would be just the driving task. We call it the zone control system. So we had to be thoroughly vetted through that system. We were giving feedback on, we were learning what we were going to teach and being assessed by that. Then it would be a class on in-vehicle teaching. Both of those are the classes that I've co-taught with another expert from Oregon. There's 2 classes on classroom management, classroom teaching. I think those are the main courses right there. Then you're required to take a drug and alcohol education course, so that you could be familiar with the effects of alcohol and drugs on driving. And then usually with some type of educational psychology course that was normally picked up through the regular teaching program. So those are the main courses that we went through.
Right, and we had that at Barry Town Hall, and we actually had the crediting course at Castleton at that time.
Do you do CDL also?
No, I do not.
Okay, does anybody, because I know Stafford and Rutland teaches drivers ed for CDL drivers.
Some do. It's an area that's outside of my, I went to New Hampshire to teach the zone control course, and I had a couple of truck drivers who were required to take it. And they asked me, what have you got for me? I said, guys, I don't have a whole lot, because this is out of, I'll give you the course that you're supposed to have, but you guys are well above where I'm at.
Think it'd be worthwhile to incorporate that into the program if you build it?
At this point, I don't know. I'll be honest, because a lot of those, you've got to get a little bit more experience. We're dealing with novice drivers between the ages of 15 and 17. That might be a big stretch. Let's give them a little bit of experience before they step into that field.
What was the question, Senator?
About CDL driver training. Stafford Tech does that.
Yep.
A lot of Casella's drivers.
Yep.
Yes,
I know them. Yep. Well, I think DMV works with the CDL licensing, and I know DMV is listening in. They're on Zoom list.
Senator Weeks.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first off, let me just say that I think my hats off to you guys. You guys have the patience of a saint. Certainly respect what you're doing for our youth and to keep our highways safe and what have you. So anyway, first, thank you. But I'm having a little trouble kind of understanding what the request is. So I've heard a lot of different variations on what programs have been in the past. If you can articulate what you're asking for, and for example, I've heard options where at a university site, potentially fledgling driver's ed teachers come in and they get trained at a kind of a formal institute. I think I heard that kind of in the mix. I heard a certifier coming into a location and then taking fledgling driver safety or driver training instructors and over a day or a couple of days. I'm just kind of wondering, what are you advocating?
Well, we're advocating to be part of the university system. And then the university system, wherever it's located, whether it's at Castleton or other places through in the university system, they would have adjunct faculty, which is what we did. When we brought in those consultants, they became, especially from Oregon, they became part of an adjunct faculty, and it would be over a course of a summer, not just, we meet on weekends, but it would be course over a summer. It took about 2.5 years to get certified. You couldn't get certified under 2.5 years. So
again, let me be specific if I can. Are you looking at standing up an actual facility, or are you looking at just making use of a classroom and a training area at a particular school for a certain period of time?
We're looking to have the university system And it may be more than one. So people from the New York side and people from the New Hampshire side would be able to take these courses to be able to be housed in the university system. And because it's not just the potential teachers that we're looking for, you have to be, if you're a part of the AOE, you have to be recertified every 5 years. So we got a bunch of teachers that need classes to get recertified, and they would offer those classes as well. So it's not just the beginning teacher, it's the ones that are already certified. And thank goodness the legislature many years ago in the State Board of Education said the superintendent of every district needs to offer driver education to their students. And so those teachers have to keep certification. So this would be a place where they could get courses to get recertification credits, as well as potential new teachers. And
So I'm just gonna, because we have about 5 minutes left,
Yeah.
and we can always have you back, but Professor Reardon, do you want to weigh in and help us here a little bit, just in terms of, you're at Castleton, we've heard from you in the past. What is this an opportunity for us to create, this sort of an advisory board or a study commission that would help us to sort of implement some of these programs, get these programs going?
Well, so let me first tell you that a couple of weeks ago, I was approached to join the group looking at this issue. And I think, first of all, the reason that Castleton let the program go is because Castleton was providing the oversight for credit for the Vermont Higher Education Collaborative. And when the Vermont Higher Education Collaborative let the program go, it kind of looked like Castleton let it go. But at that point, we were the ones that were providing the oversight for credit, because obviously the Higher Ed Collab is not an institution of higher ed. They can't provide credit. But so there's two things that I've been working on really in the last couple of weeks. One, trying to soften the landing as far as what the accreditation of this program might look like through the Agency of Education. So I've met with some of the members of the teacher education group there and talked about ways in which we could get this program aligned and approved initially from their end. They're very supportive of this. They would love to see a program here in Vermont. So I feel pretty good about the fact the Agency of Ed is willing to work with us to establish a recommendation. We're also looking at what the new course and credit approval process will look like in the Vermont State University. I know what the one at Castleton looks like, where you use faculty assembly and curriculum committee, et cetera. It's going to be different with the merger. And so I guess, from my end of it, I think the ask really is for you guys to be as supportive as you can, both to the Agency of Education and to the state college system, to say, let this group work with this. There's some great experts in driver's ed, and we're definitely willing to take a look at it from a perspective of providing the facility and the oversight. So I think we've already made some inroads here. I think the ask probably is that from a legislative perspective, there's support on your end, encouraging the Agency of Ed to work with us collaboratively to get this accredited, and to work with the state college system just to make sure that they are also aware that you see this as a positive moving forward for the state.
Well, that's great. And I'll have our committee assistant, when Secretary French is in next week talking about independent schools, we could just have him stick around and talk a little bit about this issue and let them know. I think that we're all enthusiastic. I don't think Senator Bueller supports it, but I think everybody else
I support it.
supports it. Yes.
Thank you. Just how many, do we have a shortage of driver ed instructors or certified?
We have 7 schools that can't find teachers.
Okay, so you're in the same boat as everybody else. And then if you're tied in with Castleton University, and there are teachers that want to take this as to supplement their education, then you've got that population to kind of supplement. All right.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Townsend, glad you're here. Is there anything you would like to say?
I could fill in some gaps on some of the areas. For those who don't know, I was the consultant Department of Education for 4 years, and the last one has been referenced that that position no longer is staffed. And at that point, the courses were moved to the Higher Education Collaborative, as they have talked about, and Mr. Redden has pretty well defined how that went from there. But the collaborative was developed for teacher preparation courses that were not covered by the state's colleges, like some special education and so forth. They still exist, but and the collaborative said to me when I left the Department of Education, we can't do this without somebody like you, so come and work for us. And so I went to the collaborative for 7 years, and then it was time to retire. And when I retired, they couldn't find a person to provide that coordination with the background that I had, and so they dropped it. And they were the providers of the courses, but Castleton, as Mr. Redden has said, provided the academic credit and some oversight. And so arrangements were made to move everything to Keene. And I continued to be a liaison between Keene and a point of contact for teachers, individuals that wanted to take Keene courses. And I got them started, and then Agency of Education and Department of Motor Vehicles, had to approve the courses. I wasn't in authority to do that, but that's been my connection, and up until now.
That's helpful. Final question, Senator Williams.
Thank you. Is it still mandatory for everybody to take driver's education? When I was in high school,
yeah.
it was.
It is mandatory if you're under 18. There is nothing mandatory between 18 and whatever. And I had a bill in before COVID, it was the novice driver bill, that said no matter how old you are, you need to have some kind of driver education training and education. And DMV and a bunch of us wrote a curriculum for people over 18, because what's happening is a lot of schools can't see all their students. And so people wait till they're 18, take a few lessons and get a license without a lot of training. And now the leading cause of injury and death by far is 18 to 24-year-olds. So we got to do something about that problem, but that's a different problem of how do we address people not taking driver's ed and just going for a license.
So I flunked driver's ed anyway. and then I slipped through the cracks. I didn't have to take it.
Yeah, well, and the car technology, Senator, the car technology itself has changed so much. We learned 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. You got to go 8 and 4. We learned, I didn't have power steering when I got a license. Now power steering is very, very sensitive, that if you move the wheel 1 inch on the steering wheel, the cars move 3 feet. And so technology, I have to get trained in technology all the time. That's our major theme in our May 23rd conference, because the car technology, people are getting new cars and not knowing how to drive them.
This has been incredibly helpful. I do appreciate everyone taking the time. If you want to follow our work, it looks like the agency will come in next Thursday and just sort of let us know. We'll ask them for an update, where things are, let them know that we're supporting these efforts, and they may identify something that we can do legislatively besides just saying, hey, this is important.
Senator, do you know what time they're coming in on next Thursday?
Well, we're not 100% sure, but I can have Hayden email you.
Great, thank you.
Barbara, you would email Hayden, and then you guys can sort of coordinate that.
I can do that, Senator. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all very much. That was very helpful, very informative. Great.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, senators.
Or do you want?
We'll take it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll take it.
We like that.
All right.
There you go. There's I noticed the faces around the room with the 10 and 2, 8 and 4. The reason for that is when the airbag deploys, it's going to push your hands back into your face and cause some serious injury.
Where's the cutoff point for the different?
They're all individual sheets.
So what was the answer to your question?
Oh,
I used to work the brake in the yellow line.
Well, what it is
If you could see
we,
it.
we teach the concept of aiming at an inanimate object in the middle of your path of travel. In a left-hand turn, when that corner post lines up with that, the change you make is to release the brake, maybe an adjustment in acceleration, and straighten out. When it's a turn to the right, as it goes by the rearview mirror, you're basically at a 45-degree angle. But if you can't break that down, students have an awful.
See, I'd never be able to pass it. Yeah. I wouldn't.
You're welcome to take one of our classes. We'd love it.
I don't have time.
Takes me back
Oh, I
to
hear that. I hear that.
police
Yeah, right.
driving,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, thank you, everybody. So our last witness today, and I believe she can be brief. Sue, are you with us? There you are. Sue, we're talking about pre-kindergarten, and we're talking about study language. You probably know where things are. We are moving toward having health and welfare, until I'm told otherwise, doing an early childhood education bill with S56. This committee has been charged by the pro tem to come up with pre-K study language so that when we return next January, we can jump into the conversation of how to advance pre-kindergarten in our schools. And so what we asked Jay Nichols to do yesterday was to help us sort of do the old, can everybody get together in the cafeteria, the V's, and help us to, come up with some language, some of the questions that you would need answered. Now that we have this time to answer some of these questions over the summer, early next fall, so we can hit the ground running in January. So would you mind, I guess a couple of things, the floor will be yours in just a moment, but the big questions, would you mind coordinating with Jay a little bit and helping to answer some of those questions, or helping to identify those questions?
Yes, my testimony will be brief. I wouldn't mind that at all. And we've already started doing that.
Sue, I can't thank you enough. Really, that's helpful. That's great. Yeah. I hope you have a wonderful birthday. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, there isn't. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, committee, I think we'll leave it there.